water is coursing down our street, and of course it goes right in, catches and goes right in and under our sidewalk and begins to fill this hole. I imagine just watching it in a little bit of a rainstorm that you could probably take in over a real rainstorm probably 5 or 10,000 gallons of water. And what I was thinking was that this, with an approved methodology, if people were willing to take, I'm not talking about every person on the street, but if volunteers were willing to do that, it would be a real way to bring in a lot of water that instead we're within about 4 miles of the Pacific Ocean. So what happens is, I know this, I've walked the entire Ballona Creek and the entire Sepulveda Channel, which goes into Ballona Creek, which our area drains into. And when this happens, there's a lot of water, and it's going unabated eventually into our ocean and polluting it. So my hope would be to use private homes to do this, and obviously there would have to be ordinances, but it is a way to take care of these problems. And certainly the French drains are a big answer just on site, but the street water could be done in this way too, with some imagination and obviously engineering.
Right, engineering is pretty important for it for
anyway,
a lot of reasons.
It's just a couple seconds.
So you've been up to Elmer Avenue, I'm assuming, then too.
I
You've seen
have,
what they do.
yeah, and I've been
that's a version of it.
Yeah, I've been to Elmer Avenue. I've been to the Oral Street project. I've walked every park in the city of LA and looked at, there again, all of those parks had water, not features, but actual water coming in. And then it was put into storm drains and sent away. So I know that whether it's in, El Segundo or wherever it is, that there are a lot of opportunities. For example, along our Sepulveda Creek.
Yeah. And then we should probably wrap up because there are people here for all our other agenda items. But this is great.
Anyway, I would love to talk further, and I would be happy to come back to Sacramento again if you were having a meeting on these kind of subjects, because they fascinate me, and I've put pretty much my life for the last 10 years into this kind of thing.
That's great. Thank you for your initiative on all of that. And through the development of our stormwater strategy, you're a good person to talk to.
Thank you.
As we do that. We have 2 quick videos, and then we'll move to the rest of the agenda. Yeah, seen those. There you go. What are we looking at?
So this is the pipe that's under the sidewalk filling up the hole. And the water just keeps flowing in, but of course when it gets to the point at which the pipe comes in, it doesn't let any more water in. This was just so that I could see what would happen. So that's why I say this water accumulated in 5 or 10 minutes. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. All right. Now, I'm going to pick up the pace. We're going to move to the minutes for the January 20th and 21st board meeting. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I believe that carries. Next, California's ongoing drought emergency. I see Mr. O'Hagan and Ms. Montgomery. John's going to take it all.
Good morning. I'm John O'Hagan, Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights. They're going to bring up a presentation for me. As you recall, on my last update in January, I was informed you of the notice of potential curtailment that went out statewide. And then also some orders that were going to be issued. So I'm just going to give you a quick update. Go ahead and move forward. I wanted to give you an idea of existing conditions. This is the information from CDEC on rainfall totals, Tulare Lake Basin, 6.8 inches. San Joaquin, 5-station index, 9.3 inches. Sacramento 8-station, 23 inches. The Stowe water equivalent at this time is 14% of April average. And then the major reservoir conditions, roughly about 50% of average for this time of year. And
heard
all,
that San
all those
Francisco-
hyperlinks are there to the sites that the information is coming from.
So then this is all going to be online so people can
Click on it.
click
yes.
on it. That's great. But big news over the weekend in San Francisco, and then again today, that it was not a drop in January.
Right. It's the driest January on record, as I understand it. Okay, next slide. This is the forecast, 5-day forecast for the storm that's coming in this week. As you can see, the total for the Sacramento Valley is 1.19 inches. It's a lot heavier up in the north coast and lighter in the southern area. But that is for a forecast from NOAA that we can access and see for forecasting of rainfall coming in.
What does that mean? So the North Coast would get a lot of rain, which
Yeah,
is gonna
that
be
they,
good for those small communities. It helped last year. What does this mean for the reservoirs?
Well, this will all help because the runoff obviously gets into the reservoirs, but it's not a lot of rain is the point, is what I'm saying. Up in the north coast, it's very good because there's a lot of inches that may be falling up there. But as you move into the Sacramento Valley, it's not as much rainfall. So that's just information for giving you an idea of the storm coming in. Okay, go ahead. The activities update, as I mentioned, the drought website is going to be updated and be available. We're going to be putting in our diversion demand data set so that stakeholders can take a look at it and use it and give us feedback on that data. The Term 91 curtailment, as you know, that curtailment is based on the supplemental storage water releases that the projects do. We want to put up a curve for that so people know when that's going to be anticipated. We are going to be sending out a notice of probable curtailment under that Term 91 condition, and that only affects permit and license holders post-1966.
What percentage of the water is that?
It's not a large percentage of water, but it is a condition that the permittees and licensee holders that have those will need to address. I believe there's a total of 118 parties that were subject to Term 91.
And for Term 91, for quite some time, they've been notified electronically, correct? Or don't they have at least a system where they know to look it up on the website?
There is a posting on the Bureau's website that identifies the supplemental project releases. We wanted to put it as a more graphic display so it makes it simpler for people to understand, and that's what we're going to be putting on our website. So a visual graph that gives them an idea of delta conditions and then also the conditions of supplemental project water storage releases so that it will be a really quick feedback on once the supplemental project water goes to positive, that means Term 91 can be invoked.
Well,
Yeah.
but what I was getting at is I'm not quite familiar with exactly the notification process, but it's my understanding that for a while it's been sort of a real-time notification for Term 91, similar to where you're trying to head with the curtailments.
No, on Term 91, we send out actual mail-outs of the notices because of it's such a small group of parties that get it.
So, and you're able to do that within enough time
to
hit it, giving them the advance
Yes.
so that when it needs to be invoked, they are.
But we will also post it so that it shows more real-time and the graph will be updated. So that's the idea, to be more real-time, to give the public more information on that. The other graphs that we'll be putting up shortly is the Sacramento, San Joaquin. The Scott River is already up, and those are the supply and demand analysis that we do for the curtailment, potential curtailments. That will all be available soon on the website. As you know, we're migrating from 2014 to 2015, and we're improving that website at the same time. we did post some 2014 curtailment curves for the end of lifting, when we started lifting the curtailments, to give people an idea of that. The next thing that happened is we released the dry year report on 1/30/2015. That's the report back in July of 2014 that the board asked us to produce by January of 31st. And the report analyzes the board's 2014 drought response, reviewed recommendations from a 1978 drought report, and reviewed and provides staff recommendations for improving transparency, data quality, and process for 2015 and later. That report is scheduled as an informational item for discussion at the board's meeting on February 17th. Okay. Temporary urgency change petitions filed by the Bureau and the Department. The petition, we received that petition on January 23rd. We had a final concurrence letter received late on January 30th. The notice was sent out on January 27th. The executive director stated he temporarily would not object to operations of the project in accordance with the proposed TUC petition, but that temporary approval expires today. And a final decision should be out today. And then a workshop is scheduled for February 18th to receive public input on the drought contingency plan and on the TUC petition. So they are already scheduled for comments at that time. Next slide.
I have a question on that, and maybe Mr. Howard might want to answer it. I thought that there was going to be an effort to bring it to us sooner, so that for those that have concerns one way or the other, that there'd be an opportunity to come before the board in short order.
Yeah, I looked into that option and was trying to find other dates where we could get it before the board, but with board schedules and room availability and other factors, just seemed like it wasn't going to work prior to the 18th.
Did you just check that our calendars had something on it? I mean, did someone
No,
ask
we
if
were
there were
looking at-
things we could move?
Sure, we were looking at things that could move as well, but it just
Oh,
looked
that's
like
too bad.
we weren't going to be able to get, I mean, there was one day I think we could get 3 board members, but one was going to be only there for a couple of hours, and so it just didn't seem like it was going to work without the staying it to the 15th,
So
the 18th.
I don't want to venture into any of the substance that would, result in an inappropriate discussion, since, this issue is not noticed. But considering opportunities because of the storm, I mean, there may not even be an opportunity to pick up some additional water, but just wondering if you took that into consideration.
Yeah, actually, I have taken it into consideration in a couple of ways. One, the opportunities that might provide for entrainment of species in the Delta. And secondly, with respect to the fact that, I think one of the more contentious issues is whether between flows of 7,100 to 5,500 exports should be allowed to rise. But with the storm, I expect the flows to be well above
That's what I was
7,100
hoping.
over the next week or two, and so therefore it wouldn't be a factor in for the next week or two. It might be a factor tomorrow. And so by the time it gets to the board on the 18th, maybe flows will start receding by then, and it might start becoming a factor again after a while. But I assume that the flows will be up next week, and that issue won't be a factor.
Okay.
Okay, the last activities, we have other temporary urgency change petitions and transfers. As I mentioned, the last update that we had 2 that were going to be issued, and they have been issued. It's the Department of Water Resources temporary transfer. We approved that on January 20th. The transfer allows exchange of 5,000 acre feet and between a State Water Project and CVP contractors, and it deals with Contra Costa Water District, Alameda County Water District, and Alameda County Flood Control. The other temporary urgency change renewal we did was the City of Thousand Oaks, which was approved on January 21st. Since that last board update, we have received 2 more temporary urgency change renewal requests, and that's from the June Lake Public Utility District and then also the City of Santa Cruz. And if you have any questions.
I do recognize that list of TUCPs, and also I think last time you mentioned the Sonoma TUCP. Is that right? So for the Russian River, had that been processed?
I'll have to ask Amanda. She's here. I brought her down.
And my only point is that I'm seeing the same folks come forward, you know, this year, and should expect probably some other ones such as El Dorado and other.
We may see repeat customers since
Yeah.
it's the same situation. With Sonoma County Water Agency, we've been closely discussing their need to file a urgency change again. They have not decided yet. They've said it's possible towards the end of this month that they would file a request, but they're waiting to see how this storm plays out and how that affects their reservoirs.
Right, and then they had different antecedent conditions last year versus this year. There was a lot more precipitation in December. So interesting to see this
Right.
unfold and helping out similar communities this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
You bet.
Keep up the good work. Next, item number 3, update on emergency water conservation regulations. Oh, thank you. Gosh.
Morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name is Eric Oppenheimer. I'm the Director of the Office of Research, Planning, and Performance. We've got Katie Landau here today, environmental scientist with Office of Research, Planning, and Performance, Carlos Mejia, staff counsel with Office of Chief Counsel, and Mark Emerson with the Division of Drinking Water. This
Hello.
is...
Excuse the back of our heads as we swivel because it's not showing up on our screens.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know, in order to. Oh, it's just not on mine. Maybe it's not on. Where is it? You see it?
Power button.
Ah, there. Check video cable. Never mind. Just proceed. I'll watch yours.
Okay. So this is our monthly progress update on the status of the emergency conservation regulation. We've been collecting and presenting these updates for the last 7 months now. We have initiated some compliance and compliance actions and assistance we've previously reported on, sent out notices to all of the water suppliers that were not filing their mandatory reporting. Additionally, we've sent out letters to all of the suppliers who have indicated to us that they have not implemented mandatory restrictions on outdoor water use, and we're currently following up with them. And there's a couple slides that'll get at that. And then, as you know, the emergency regulation has a expiration date after 270 days, so it's set to expire. I believe it's April 24th or April 25th of April 2015. So this slide goes over the compliance with the reporting requirements since June over the last 7 months. In general, a couple comments here. Compliance has been, with the reporting has been, I'd say exceptional. We did have a few suppliers, as I mentioned, that were not reporting. We sent letters out to them. At this point, all 411 water suppliers who are supposed to be reporting have submitted at least one report, and most of the suppliers have submitted all of the required reports. Each month when we present this information, it appears that there's a dip in compliance, and you can see the red line shows the percent of the 411 suppliers that have filed reports, and we were at 99, 98%, now we're at 94. I just wanted to comment
Yeah,
that
the scale makes it look bad, but it's really still 94.
yeah, it's still very good. And then the other factor I just wanted to mention was there are a handful of suppliers that do not get the data needed to report to us in time to meet the 15th of the month, which is the reporting deadline. We usually pull the data about a week after the 15th, so we give people time, but still there are a few that just can't get the data in time. But what you'll find is next month, the numbers for December will bounce back up, and I would predict in the area, of about 98%. So last month, we saw a similar type of trend, and now we had only 10 suppliers who didn't report. So, pretty good. And the other comment I'll make is that even though there's 25 suppliers that aren't represented in the data that we're going to show you today, they represent a very small portion of the population that are represented by the 411 suppliers. So they really have, trivial significance in the results. So this slide shows compliance with the mandatory restriction, implementing a mandatory restriction on outdoor water use. And over time, the compliance with these restrictions has improved.
This is the water supplier complying with our regs, not the compliance of people with whatever their requirements are or the other.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct. This is the water suppliers who have implemented a stage of their water shortage contingency plan, which includes a mandatory restriction on outdoor water use, which is, one of the fundamental requirements of the emergency regulation. So compliance is good. We have sent out compliance letters to over 30 suppliers who have indicated that they're not implementing a mandatory restriction. And we're in the process now of evaluating the responses that they have provided, determining, if they're in compliance or not. It's not always 100% clear. There is some ambiguity there. And really the goal is to bring them into compliance and to make sure they're conserving as much water as possible. So that's sort of the approach we're moving forward with. And if need be, we'll escalate enforcement.
On that one, I just want to alert my colleagues to the request that I've received from at least two agencies who are implementing mandatory restrictions but do not have 2 days or 3 days a week restrictions. They have mandatory restrictions, but it's about runoff and not about how often you water. And their request was not that we shouldn't pursue this, but to be clear when we make our recommendations or put our regulations together, to be super, super clear, unambiguous as to what it is we mean. If we mean reduction in the number of days for watering, we should say so. Not say just mandatory restrictions, because they have mandatory restrictions, but not necessarily days of the week. So it's not telling us which way to go, but the next time we re-up these, and I assume we will, the regulations, we need to be very careful in our words.
Yeah, I think that's something that
we
will
heard
be
that.
important to consider as you move forward with any potential next steps. As I've indicated in the past a couple times, not all mandatory restrictions are created equal, and some of these mandatory restrictions are limits on, you can't water during the day, while others go as far as limits on days of week and minutes per station. So there's going to,
You can't turn on your sprinklers when you're wearing blue.
I haven't seen that one yet. But. So
I think this reflects our approach, which was to say the cities have urban water management plans, you have drought contingency plans, implement them, and then let's see how it goes. And so, that's what we've done, and I think that's a good way to go. And now, as we reconsider the regulations, maybe we should think about some of those details on what mandatory restrictions entail.
Yeah, and I think the initial approach has worked well and yielded good results. And in the majority, about 94% of the cases, it's pretty clear what they're supposed to do according to their plan. But in a small percent of cases, it's a little ambiguous, and those are the ones we're looking into.
Right, and again, they're not a big percentage of water.
They're not a big percent, that's correct.
But it does help to kind of gauge the effectiveness of the programs and behavior and how people respond. Are you looking at it in terms of percentage of reduction to just get a better idea for those that have these more flexible approaches?
We are looking at the percent of reduction by each supplier, including the ones who have not essentially complied with the regulation. And I think that's one of the factors that we'll look at when we decide if further enforcement action is needed. What we have not been able to do is sort of look at the range of actions people are taking and correlate those to either high levels of conservation or low levels. That's something we'd like to do. Potentially we have the data to do it, but my sense is from looking at the data so far, we would need to collect some additional information on more specific actions that are being undertaken by each supplier to do that. But that would be very valuable, I think.
Just an addition, something that's terribly popular right now is turf removal and replacement with something. But there's very little data that actually shows how much water is truly saved in the areas where turf replacement has occurred. There is some information, but it's not as robust as perhaps people would wish it to be.
Yeah, and at the end of the presentation, we're going to go over some information on turf removal in the Metropolitan Water District service area, but it certainly doesn't get at the question of how much water it saved. It's just how popular is the program and how much turf removal is actually occurring. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Landau, and she's going to walk you through the results for December.
Great.
It's the wheel and the button.
So this slide shows the trend in the statewide water production in millions of gallons on a monthly basis for the 7 months that we've been tracking the data. The orange is 2013 data and the blue is the 2014 data. As you can see, the water production is significantly higher in the summer months, but as we've moved through the fall and the winter, we're seeing a decrease or downward trend, which is expected to do both due to the drop-off in outdoor irrigation and cooler temperatures. There are two things to note on this graph. The first is that for both 2013 and 2014, December overall used the least amount of water. And the second is that the difference in the water production when you compare 2014 to 2013 is the most significant we've seen in the last 7 months. On this graph, that difference is shown as the between the top of the blue column and the top of the orange column. And that's highlighted on this graph, where the difference in those two columns for June 2014, for example, is equivalent to 9.4 billion gallons in savings. So we then increased to 18 billion gallons in July, up to 27 billion gallons in August, and then moved back down to 22 in September, 13 billion gallons in October, 15 billion gallons in November, and in December we saw the highest level of savings with 29.9 billion gallons of water. This means that over the last 7 months, we've actually conserved 134.6 billion gallons of water, which is the equivalent of over 413,000 acre feet. And that's enough water to provide 1.8 million Californians with water for 1 year.
Right.
On this graph, that same level of savings is shown as a percentage comparing 2014 to the 2013 levels. So that means that 29.9 billion gallons of water we saved for December is a 22% savings compared to 2013. Not only is it significant because it's, really wonderful that we were able to save that much water for the month of December, but it also indicates that the water conservation efforts that we've taken, such as turning off the outdoor sprinklers, not overwatering our lawns, and et cetera, are having a really positive impact on our conservation efforts. Additionally, as you can see, December is by far the highest level of savings we've had to date, and it's the first time we've exceeded a 20% degree of savings.
Right, on average. You have
On
some that are
average.
in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but a lot of people are up near 20.
Correct.
But the average is, this is the first time the average is that high.
With all this wonderful news, we must also caveat that we saw a large amount of precipitation in December, and it was significantly wetter than 2013. So, which I can show you in a couple of slides. And that, as John mentioned earlier, January is also one of the driest on records. So while it's really wonderful that we've able to achieve this level of savings for December, it will be interesting for next month to see how long people, kept their sprinklers off after it stopped raining.
Yeah, we have to hope that people did.
Correct.
It's interesting because when we were looking at the October numbers and bemoaning that they seemed to drop, part of the reason we were told is that it was very hot. It was hotter, particularly in Southern California, during October than it was in 2013, and so people watered outside more. Now we see a big jump, which is great. We'll take it. And it was wet, and so to me, it just reinforces what we've thought all along, that the extent of outdoor water use is a huge driver of water conservation and water use in urban California, and that it makes a huge difference. So if people can remember to keep their sprinklers off, that'd be great. And I also think the fact that they did turn them off isn't chopped liver. I mean, it's an important thing because people had to turn them off. So I'm going to take it as a conscious effort and not just a coincidence of rain, because I'm in that kind of a mood.
So on this next slide, we saw that there was a 22% savings statewide for December, which on this graph is denoted as that red dashed line across there. But when you start to look at December's water production savings by hydrologic region, as it's shown here, you can see that the savings is not consistent throughout the regions. Here, the hydrologic region with the lowest level of savings for the month of December is on the left, and as you move along towards the right on the x-axis, you see increased savings. 8 of the 10 hydrologic regions showed increased water production savings as compared to their savings in November.
Okay.
And additionally, it's noteworthy that 5 of the hydrologic regions were able to show more than 20% savings, with San Joaquin River additionally coming very close to that level of savings. I want to highlight the South Coast hydrologic region, as it showed significant improvement from November to December. They had 3% savings in November, and they were able to increase that up to 23% savings. That goes along with the fact that the South Coast did see far more rain this year than they did last year, and they also did experience cooler temperatures, which I will show you on the next slide. So we've been tracking the precipitation and temperature, and on this slide you see the precipitation on the left and the temperature on the right for select cities in the various hydrologic regions. And on the left, as you can see, I've said several times, the precipitation was much higher in December throughout the state than it was in 2013. And there was actually approximately 6 inches of rain statewide versus last year, where we saw about a half an inch. There's also regional variability in the amount of precipitation. The northern portion of the state saw higher levels of rain than the southern region. When you look at the temperatures statewide, it was slightly warmer in 2014 than it was in December of 2013. But again, we have some slight variability regionally. The northern and eastern portions of the state were slightly warmer versus the south coast portion, which we did see that cooler temperature. However, as we've mentioned, the rain didn't stick around for December or for January, and I'll pass that back to Eric.
So, as we've already heard this morning, January was one of the driest years on record. And this slide just underscores it. This is just weather station data from Sacramento weather station going back to 1942.
That's depressing. I want to go back to the December rain.
Exactly. I feel like the wet blanket here. December was
Or not
very-
a wet blanket. You got to come up with a different metaphor. I think.
True, bad analogy. So we've got estimated 2015, that should actually be 2015 data on the end there. The bottom line is, based on our assessment of this one single station, it was the lowest on record for the over 70-year period of record that we're showing here. And so obviously that raises a couple of concerns. One, for our water supply and what's going to happen in terms of the drought, as we've talked about. And two, we hope that people still will keep their outdoor irrigation either off or to a minimum as we move through January and February, especially if it starts raining again this weekend. Turn off your sprinklers. But there's a chance that we could see the conservation numbers erode in January. And in general, I'd say that we should expect more volatility in these percent reduction numbers in the winter period.
Very good word.
Than in the summer. Talk a little bit about the residential gallons per capita day data that we've been collecting since October. Across the board, the numbers are lower than we've seen in the previous reporting months. The highest is now at 330 gallons per person per day. If you remember back a couple months, we were at like 500 for the highest. The lowest is down to 33 gallons per day, which seems really low. I actually contacted a couple of water suppliers and kind of, is it ground truth a little bit, and they say, yeah, they're in the mid 30s, low 40s, and they feel that's an accurate number. So that's excellent news. The average statewide gallons per capita day, residential gallons per capita day, is 67, which is down about 20 gallons from November. So again, that's a pretty low number, 67 total use, considering 55 gallons is the performance standard in the water code for just indoor water use. And in fact, 78 suppliers of 78 suppliers who are reporting that represent 9.5 million people are using less than 55 gallons per person per day for the month of December. We've said all along that with areas where we've got high RGPCD data or numbers and a low percent reduction or low conservation levels, it raises questions, and those are areas we're always interested in. And honestly, this month, there weren't a lot of those. In general, conservation, percent reduction.
I was kind of looking for scofflaws in the data, and usually there were more. So,
yeah, it looked.
Yeah, people seem to be down.
It looked overall like people did well this month. There were some that were higher than we'd like to see, but they were pretty much, there wasn't a pattern. They were larger or smaller suppliers, desert area, South Coast, some in the I believe the Sacramento Valley. So it's something we're continuing to track and look at and see if we can identify areas where we can essentially figure out why we're not seeing the response that we'd like to see.
I mean,
and
I have
hopefully
a
work
few
with it.
I'd like you to call.
Certainly, yeah. Be happy to.
Great.
And then this is the per capita water use data by hydrologic region. We've been showing you this every month since we've been collecting the data. The line with the dots on it shows the percent reduction in overall water production again this December compared to December 2013, and they're ranked from left to right, from lowest percent reduction to highest percent reduction. And I think if you look at all the ones that were over 20% or close to 20%, San Joaquin River, Sacramento River, San Francisco Bay, South Coast, Tulare Lake, and Central Coast, very high levels of conservation compared to last year, and pretty low levels of per capita water use.
This is a beautiful slide.
And I would just, I know we'll be hearing from the public later, and Penny Falcon and I were on a panel yesterday together, and one of the points that she will be making, I assume, and that she made yesterday, is that this does not, however, show from where people started. So South Coast, certainly LA, started at a much lower level of savings to begin with per capita. So anyway, that's just something that we should keep in mind as we look toward the future as to how we're going to talk about what it is we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a great point, and if I haven't said it already, the South Coast for December really does deserve special recognition because they're at a 23%. Everyone's done good statewide, but the South Coast is at 23% conservation compared to last year for December. If we think back to the previous reports, they were more in the range of 3 to 7%, so that's a huge jump. In addition, for the whole region, which is the most populous region in the state, they're down to 66 gallons per person per day.
Which is really pretty impressive when you think about it. I mean, I think that speaks to the 20 years of dealing with indoor that South Coast has been doing, but also obviously something happening, hopefully in messaging and volition on outdoor.
Yeah, agreed. So actually continuing, I thought I was going to continue on the South Coast theme, but I've got one more slide here. This just shows the overall trend in per statewide gallons per capita a day going back to June. And this is not necessarily surprising. I think 67 is a great number statewide for December. The trend's going down as outdoor use is ratcheting back as we head into the cooler, wetter winter months. But this slide just demonstrates that trend. That's all I'll say about it.
When we, let's, in a painful moment, assume the drought continues, we continue this out through the year. I'm assuming you're going to want to keep comparing to the month in 2013, so as opposed to moving the...
Yeah, that's a question really for the board, but that would be, excuse me, sorry, go ahead.
No, so go ahead.
My recommendation would be to continue to track 2015 versus 2013. And in fact, that's what we've been telling suppliers as we go into January. But otherwise, then it's like tracking, the savings compared to the months that we've already, been trying to save. I just think keeping the same baseline would make the most sense for a number of reasons.
I think one thing that would be helpful, though, would be to, of course, then these charts would have so many bars and it would start to get confusing, especially if we go on year after year. I hope not, but that way you can pull out sort of the outliers. Like, let's say next December is not wet. You want, and it shows, a very different picture. You'd want to be able to go back and say, well, yeah, but what occurred last time was pretty wet, or a month that was hotter than normal, warmer temperatures, to be able to put it into context on why it may be an outlier compared to maybe a more of a normal December.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's we could do, especially after we get a full year of data collected.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that with the wet December, we do have a very interesting data point here that represents indoor use, plus a little bit of outdoor. But it starts to get at the heart of separating out. And we do that, in the wastewater business. We look at the the wet weather months, as opposed to dry weather months to figure out what sewer flow is. So we look at dry weather because there's not infiltration. So it's one of those separating out, the outdoor versus indoor use. So this will be an important data point moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a point we'll actually show you in a slide, in a few slides from now. But in some regions, I think the December data is probably starting to get pretty close to an approximation of indoor use for those regions.
Interesting.
So now returning to the South Coast theme. So every month we try to identify some noteworthy accomplishments in terms of conservation. And this month, because the South Coast did really step up and do so well, we decided to focus on South Coast water suppliers. So this is the list of, I don't know how many are here, maybe 15 or so, where they were able to achieve more than a 20% or more level of conservation, and they had per capita use less than 60 gallons. And they're listed, I believe, in order of size of the city, so population. So just to point out a few on the left, they all deserve kudos. But
Yeah.
San Diego really stepped up. They were the largest of the group. They represent a lot of people, as well as Eastern Municipal, Oxnard, and Oceanside. All
San Diego's number is crazy low.
it is.
Look it up.
I don't have it handy.
I
Katie
do.
can
I'll
find
look
it.
up.
I also actually wanted to sort of give an honorable mention to Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, given that they are by far and away the state's largest supplier in terms of population served. They just barely didn't make it onto this list. They had over 20% savings, and I think they were about 62 GPCD, so they did great too.
No, it's really good. San Diego's 46.
Right, 46, which is exceptional.
Yeah, and then San Francisco's 40 now.
Yeah, there was some definitely
It's like, whoa.
surprisingly low numbers. yeah.
Whoa.
And then just another way to look at the GPCD data, I believe we showed you something similar last month. So this just breaks out the amount of people statewide. So this gets rid of sort of the whole concept of water suppliers and just looks at population statewide and where they fit in terms of their per capita water use. So basically what we're seeing here is you've got 20% of the state's population, 9.5 million people who are using less than 55 gallons per person per day, which is that's total use, not just indoor use, but that's equivalent to the 55 significant because it's, as I mentioned before, it's equivalent to the water code criteria for indoor water use. And then you've got, the bulk of the state looks like about 70% of the state in the range of 55 to 100 gallons per person per day. And then you've got, just a very small portion of the population, 1%, that are, over that 200 gallons per person per day threshold, which seems very high for considering the December situation that we had. So indoor versus outdoor use, and the question that Board Member Moore brought up in terms of the December data approximating indoor use in some areas. So what this slide shows, this is estimated, and I want to be careful to say estimated indoor versus outdoor use, and it's based on a summary of about 10 years of DWR data that they use for the water plan. That was the summary was done by Pacific Institute. They provided us with this information, and it shows in the blue the percent of the total water use in each region that goes for indoor use, and then in the red, the percent that goes to outdoor water use. And we wanted to include this slide just because it does show, especially in some of the regions, but really across all the regions, how important outdoor water use is, and sort of again underscores the reason why our regulations focused on outdoor water use. In general, I'd say it's about at least half of the state's residential water use is going for outdoor purposes, primarily outdoor irrigation, and in some areas it's as shown on the chart, much higher. The yellow bars that sort of intersect the graphs, those are the December reporting results. So those are the results I showed you a few slides back. And as you can see, like in the North Coast, for example, the current December use is actually, total use is actually less than the estimates for indoor water use. And then if we look at San Francisco, Central Coast, South Coast, Sacramento River, they're pretty much right on the line, again, kind of indicating that the December data is probably a fairly reasonable estimate in those hydrologic regions for indoor water use. So it's useful information. In San Joaquin River, Tulare Lake, and the North Coast, again, the actual use is lower than the indoor, than the estimates for indoor use. So it sort of, begs the question, do we have the right numbers for indoor use?
Right.
And, it's an area, I think, that warrants further research and investigation because it is estimated. I mean, nobody is collecting metering indoor versus outdoor use, or very few if they are doing it. So these numbers are important, and we're working from potentially coarse estimates in some cases. And then in the South Lahontan and Colorado River, I don't want to give too much credence to the matchup of the two data sets, but it looks like there may still be some outdoor irrigation